Hey, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hey,
Hey, Mayor. All right, I think we've got everybody here. We'll attribute the Committee on Traffic and Transportation for making me late again, but that's okay. We're going to call together to order the Committee on Real Estate for March 8th, 2021. And I'll ask Councilmember Jackson if she would be so kind as to lead us in either a moment of silence or a moment of prayer.
Thank you. If we can bow our heads for a minute. Lord, we ask that you continue to be with each of us as we are in our families, trying to be as safe as we're humanly possible, but without you, we cannot be totally safe in this world. We thank you for all the responsibilities that are placed on us, especially with this committee in representing our city as being a responsible owner of property and the uses for all of that we know are important. So thank you for this day and thank you for being with us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, ma'am. Well done. Appreciate it. I'll entertain a motion that we approve our February 22nd, 2021 minutes.
so moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Aye.
So, Ms. Copeland, I think you're on the first item is yours, isn't it? This sounds like a redo of what we've had discussed before as to the parking lot on Haggett Avenue and Fishburne Street at the American University. Item number A.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to see that issue on the agenda because there hasn't been any change on that. I we're fine. That's been on to council and had first reading. So I was a bit surprised to see that on the agenda, unless Lee Bailey, is there something new that I need to know about? I think this might have just been a mistake.
Well,
Peter.
Some change.
Yeah, there was something that was left out on the lease, I think, is what I read.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry.
no problem.
This was Department of Administration requested 3 other quick changes on this document, even after the council had approved it back in February. And they deal with repairs. Lee and I looked at it, and but we feel like they're insignificant, but they are substantive enough to have to bring back to council. So we recommend it's being resubmitted for recommended for reapproval with those minor changes.
Let me ask you a very basic question before we go any further to one of our legal counsel. We adopted first reading of this ordinance, right? That's what I remember back in February.
Yes,
So
sir.
did we give second and third reading to this ordinance as well?
Yes, sir. It's
He's shaking his
adopted.
head. Okay.
I believe we got a second reading, maybe not a third.
So is this ordinance then going to, if we approve it or recommend approval, going to trump that first ordinance? I'll just make sure we're procedurally in the right framework. That's why I'm asking. I hear heads going up and down, but I'm not sure.
So it was adopted by ordinance number 2021-20 at the last February meeting, because I didn't think it had been adopted either, but it was adopted. And so we needed to amend it after the fact, as Peter mentioned, based on, I don't think anyone expected the state to come back with any changes, but they did. So we're just following the process of amending that ordinance.
Is there anything materially different from the two? Mr. Mayor, I see your hand up.
I was just going to ask that same question. If they would please just let us know what those minor changes are.
These changes deal with the one that was adopted did not have a process for addressing condemnation and subsequent repairs due to destruction of the property. So the state insisted on having a process put in, and it requires that anything that's demolished be fixed within 90 days or the lease is terminated. As everybody knows, this is a land parking lot. There are no structures there. So we really didn't have a problem with that. The other one is a minor, it was a duplication. The state felt like there was a duplication in a repair covenant for the tenant. And so they requested that one of those be deleted. We had no problem with that.
Okay. I'll entertain a
All right,
motion
I'll
to
I'll move.
recommend approval for item A. Is there a second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion as to item number A? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right, item number B is to approve an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute on behalf of the city a memorandum of agreement with Palmetto Railways. Who's going to take this for us?
That's going to be me.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to share my screen just to kind of show you the area we're talking about. So this has been in the works, and I apologize to Councilmember Jackson, who's already had to sit through my spiel on this. It's been on the works, I think, since 2017. We've been trying to negotiate a resolution of this. It involves the southern loop or southern access route to the new Navy base intermodal facility, which runs through the city of Charleston. It's actually shown on the map. You should be able to see there's a element to this because it also runs through city-owned property known as the W.R. Grace site, which is shown on this map. But the red rail is going to be the new sort of southern loop that Palmetto Railways, my understanding is, will own. And so cars will be able to come in and out of the facility using that southern loop. And my recollection from a long time ago is Norfolk Southern and CSX basically said, we're not doing it unless there's the southern loop option. So two things this day. Back in 2017, the city hired Jennifer Beal Engineering to put together mitigation projects, and there's a long list of projects from this facility. Councilmember Seekings wanted me to mention it does not cross King Street. It does cross Meeting Street. But and I mean the total was in the neighborhood of $36 million for the mitigation projects. And then we've been the Palmetto Railways division of the Department of Commerce had put together their own mitigation study, which showed about $4.2 million in mitigation impacts that should be required. And we've been sort of stuck in a holding pattern. I think there was some talk of going up to $4.9 million recently, but a lot changed. So there's an economic bond that's going through the General Assembly. The South Carolina Ports Authority has gotten involved, and we basically received a new offer to pay us, the city, $11.5 million for both the mitigation impacts, with fairly good flexibility on how to use that money as long as they address mitigation impacts, and for the portion of the W.R. Grace site to be taken. The area to be taken would run along sort of the eastern boundary, but Randy Lowell, who represents the Ports Authority, has kind of put together a rough version, and I think the maximum it would be is 2.53 acres. So what I told TNT is I'm asking for permission to sell up to 2.53 acres of that property. I think that amount will drop down. This came up at TNT as well. I think there's a lot of questions, understandably, about, we don't know exactly where the boundaries of the property are. We don't even know the exact acreage. It's sort of my opinion, and I think the mayor shares it kind of based on the negotiations. I don't think the Ports Authority is going to, or Commerce is going to put anywhere near as good a deal on our table. I think this is a situation where it's going to be the best we can get. And if we want to walk away, we can. If not, it's just not going to get any better than this. The money has to be spent. At least $4.9 million has to be used for mitigation of the present and future impacts from the Southern Loop. The remainder would have to be spent on either mitigation impacts or replacement facilities for what would be built on the portion of W.R. Grace that will be sold. And that, so that's the public works facility was supposed to be moved from Magnolia. And, we're we're looking at the Magnolia Development Agreement to how to deal with that issue. But anyway, that's kind of where the $11.5 million would have to be spent. Otherwise, the city has discretion as to how much goes to replacement facilities versus mitigation, subject to that $4.9 million, where the mitigation is, as long as it relates to this, and that's in the city's discretion. We have maximum discretion on how to utilize the mitigation funds and the replacement funds. It's sort of within the bounds of reasonableness, so to speak. I think I addressed everything I addressed with TNT. It's hard to explain the same thing again in a little bit different way. But anyway, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them or address them. I'm sure there will be a few based on how many moving parts there are in this transaction.
Mr. McQueen, can you put me back on full screen so I can?
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry.
He's got their hand up. So I see Councilmember Jackson does, but let me before I call on her, ask this real quick question to make sure I understand. So it's 2.5 acres, give or take, and we're going to transfer ownership of that to the SPCA in exchange for 11.5 million, and of that, almost 5 million of that has to be used for mitigation purposes. Okay, I just want to make sure I got.
Yes, sir. That's essentially. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thanks. I did ask questions at TNT, I confess, but I saved some of my real estate questions for y'all. So I know that this is achieving a plan that we've had long before my time to move the property yard off of Milford Street and up toward Magnolia. I guess I'm curious, what will happen to the rest of the Milford Street property? Who's going to want to buy it with the southern loop surrounding it? Isn't it? I mean, are we going to be, managing that kind of a land swap too, or down the road with these same entities? Do you think? And then I'm just curious also, have they made any progress in doing whatever they have to do for the bottom properties on your map along Milford Street, I guess, the private properties that are impacted by the southern loop? What's happening to them?
I think the mayor is probably best situated to answer the first question, and I've done a little bit of homework on the second question. I'm happy to address that.
We don't own Milford Street. That was sold by the city long ago when we acquired the Herbert Street. And for full disclosure, at that time, I represented the Magnolia Development Group, and so was involved in that transaction where they bought Milford Street, leased it back to the city for $1 a year until such time as they give us notice to leave. And then the city bought the property over at Herbert Street to be a replacement, maybe a partial replacement of the facilities at Milford Street at that time. I do want to share, and this maybe gets into a secondary discussion here, that at that time, city staff felt that Herbert Street might not even be big enough then. So if you take 2.5 acres, up to 2.5 acres away from it, it's clear we will need to purchase some additional property to meet the needs both of Public Works and of, our fire department has their training there, and there's the sign shop, and there's the shop for the fire department and a few other things. So we will have to, and we already are investigating another property to purchase to augment what we have there at Herbert Street.
Sorry, I think I did misspeak. I called it Milford, and it's the property that we currently use and own.
Yeah, the rest of
the southern loop is what I'm just curious about. What we think our plan would be for that, because it's going to be surrounded by a railway.
Right. So the mitigation that we're planning enables us to, so to speak, get out. in one direction or another, depending on where a train might be. And so that's part of the need for those mitigation funds. And then, as I just mentioned, we'll need to buy another property, and I'm not sure it's under maybe an offer has been made, but we'll be in short order bringing a proposal to this committee and to City Council to purchase an additional property that between the two of them will be able to absorb all the needs that we need to relocate off of Milford Street.
And we'll keep the current one.
And hold on, Councilman Jackson, but Mayor, we're going to be kicked out of Milford Street sooner than later. I mean, that's some discussion we've had about that. That's coming up sometime in the near future, isn't it?
They're required to give us a 3-year notice to vacate. They have not given us notice yet, but I would like to hereby state that our goal is to move in 2024, despite of any notice that they may give us. Now that these stars have aligned to give us a little bit of extra resources, along with a proposal, as I mentioned, we'll bring to y'all shortly. I believe it's time for the city to get serious, to officially start a capital project budget, to design and plan for the move of our Public Works Department. Y'all know that Milford is not just worn out, it's tired. It's a day, it needs to be replaced, and it's time for us to go ahead and step out and make plans accordingly to make that transition. And I think in a 3-year time frame, we should be able to pull that off.
Yeah, thank you. I knew, Mayor, that was some subject of discussion about that facility, and appreciate you filling this in. Councilman Jackson, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure we're clear on that.
No, it's fine. I started the confusion by calling Herbert Street Milford Street. So I was curious about what happens inside the loop, and you answered my question. We'll keep that property, continue to use it, and then acquire another one. So we'll have the total amount of vacant land essentially that we need for all of our trucks and whatever.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. McQueen, let me go back to you one more time, but this may sound redundant, but of the 11,500 that we may get, and we've got to dedicate 5 million for mitigation, are there any restrictions at all on the balance of that money of what we can use it for?
Just the restriction is that we have to use it for mitigation of the Southern Loop and or replacement facilities for, and we did broadly word that for planned public works facility at W.R. Grace. I think it's the police fleet. We can use it for that, or fire training, which I think all those are in the area. And I wasn't sure if Customer Jackson's question went to privately owned property, but I can address that if that was your question earlier.
Yes, it was. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so I just today did a little bit of homework, and I'll share my screen if that's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
What has been, so the Department of Commerce started acquiring properties, I think back in 2017, 2018, probably further back than that. The city's property, the W.R. Grace site, this is county GIS, but it's located here and it's zoned heavy industrial. The Ports Authority recently filed a condemnation action for 3.7 acres of this 004 property that's owned by Chevron. And the condemnation, which is also zoned HI, condemnation notice and tender of payment was for 1.174 million for that 3.17 acres. Where's 19? It might be in here. Okay. So 4642099. That's also a condemnation notice, 0.5 acres. The amount was 239,300, and obviously the appraisals are going to be, skewed a little bit in favor of the governmental entity. 105, I believe they wanted to acquire. Can't read my writing. But nope, I don't have that one. Sorry. So Oh yeah, 105.64 acres. This was actually a deed in 2018. That's zoned LI, and they paid $476,000 for that property, and then 46638, which is up here. They haven't actually purchased the property, but it sold in 2016 for $1.55 million. It's zoned heavy industrial, and it's around 2.1 acres. And then I did 99. I don't see 19 here, but I did find another property that was, there's a condemnation notice. It was zone general business, and it was 63,000 for, I think it's 0.17 acres. So just to give you an idea of what they're purchasing these for, or noticing the condemnation amounts for, that's what things are, that just gives you an idea of what's going on in this area recently.
Thank you for that comparison. That gives us some
Yes, sir.
a good idea anyhow. Councilmember Pell, any questions or input on this thing?
Do we have an appraisal for the city's property as part of this process?
We do not.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Do y'all think
Looks
it
like we might
be-
not want one.
Yeah, maybe we ought to do we have time to get an appraisal for this?
I don't know if Lee's on. I think a part of the problem we've had with appraisals recently is getting them done quickly. Lee Bailey is on.
Hey, Chip, I am. Yeah, unfortunately, we have had a bit of a slow turnaround recently with getting appraisals back. So they're just all so slammed, but I'm happy to try to obtain an appraisal.
Matt may have already started that process. I don't recall, but the ordinance does say it'll be by separate purchase and sale agreement. So, I think the idea is to get first reading, and then when we come back for second reading, to have the purchase and sale agreement in place for first reading, and that a contingency would be the appraisal, or that it appraised for a certain amount or less than a certain amount. I don't. Yeah.
So we can go ahead and do a approval for first reading contingent on us getting a valid appraisal on it.
We could do that. Yeah. I mean, I told TNT, I wouldn't normally come to you in these types of circumstances. Having dealt with the folks that we're dealing with over the last couple of years, this is going to be what we get or not. So, and that's
Yes,
kind of where I've come from.
Okay, Councilmember Jackson.
I was just going to speculate that maybe based on what you just told us of comparisons, that we might not really want an appraisal. Just a suggestion.
I saw some of those low numbers. Councilman Waring, anything that you want to?
Yeah, well, I kind of think we need to get the appraisal. I just think that should be part of the process. And I guess why would we want to get first reading until we find out what it's worth? I mean, what's the time issue there?
Well, I think it depends whether or not you think it's a good deal. If it's a good deal, you want something in writing with the Ports Authority and the Palmetto Railways soon, and this would bind them, assuming the economic bonds going forward in the General Assembly pass. If those don't pass, this whole agreement goes away, and they're not buying our property. We're not selling our property. They're not, we basically have to address this all in the future. And I think, here, our primary negotiating point is that property, and nobody's going to think it's worth $11.5 million. The other argument we have is the municipal consent statute or constitutional provision. That's a lot more complicated, but this is the primary negotiating factor we have. And I don't think anybody needs appraisal to know this is 2.53 acres, not worth $11.5 million.
I agree with that. Well, let me ask this. after it's mitigated, is anybody doing an appraisal based on it, subject to it being cleaned up?
Well, they'll clean up the portion that they take. We'll still be responsible. The environmental issue,
Right.
the mitigation is for traffic. You know, we have a Beal engineering study, so it's for traffic improvements. It's related to traffic and other mitigation related to the Southern Loop. So to make sure that the inconvenience is as low as possible from building the Southern Loop. And at TNT, I mentioned I lived in Columbia for 5 years, so I understand the inconvenience of trains. And that's, you know, the pot is going to be for improvements to make that inconvenience as little as possible, and then for the replacement facilities. And I don't want everybody to think the public works facility, the alternative land and other things, we have to use the all of the $11.5 million over the $5 million for that, because we do have TIF funds available for the Magnolia TIF that enable us to use to construct the public works site. So, you know, it's not like we're stuck at $11.5 million to do those things,
Okay.
or 6.5 million, I guess.
I see that Mr. Somerville is on this call, I guess, from TNT. Robbie, is there anything that you want to add to this discussion, since this was something that came in front of the TNT committee? I guess not. All right. Well, let's
Might want to let him know he's on mute.
maybe. I can't see him. All right. Look, do we have a motion? I don't think we even have a motion on the floor yet, do we, Madam Clerk?
I'll move for approval. I'll move for approval.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right. So any further discussion on item B? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, I think the ayes have it. All right. We'll give it first reading, hope we get an appraisal, and then let's see where it leads us to that point. All right. Item C, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a third amendment to the memorandum between the city and the Episcopal Diocese. I guess Ms. Johnson is going to, Shaw Johnson is going to give us an update on this one.
Sure. Councilmember Shahid, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a third amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Charleston and the Episcopal Diocese of South Carolina Community Housing Development Organization, and we call that a CHODO for short. And this agreement does, or this amendment, if you will, does two different things. One, it allows for the transfer of one additional property from the ED CHODO to the City of Charleston, which is 83 Hanover Street. And then it allows the ED CHODO to utilize the remaining funds coming from the Morris Square development for homes that are located on Humphreys Court. Chip did an excellent job of pulling all of this together. We've been working with the ED CHODO for a very long time. And the city took back a number of properties over the years, most of which we have developed or is in process of being developed. And so basically we did that because the ED CHODO did not believe at the time that they had the capacity to move those forward at the appropriate level. They did do a number of housings. I said they constructed a number of houses, both primarily on the west side of Charleston, near Burke High School. But this basically would finalize, if you will, the last of the properties and allow them to use approximately $170,000, which remains to develop 2 more homes at Humphreys Court. Chip, please add as you believe appropriate.
I think that's all. That's all. And it cleans up everything that's happened over the last 15 years to make sure that all liens and all those kind of things are taken care of.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve item C?
I move for approval, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
I don't think y'all paying attention to me. It looks like y'all look gay sometimes. All right. Any further discussion? So item C, regarding the quitclaim deed at 83 Hanover Street. All right. Seeing no one wants to talk about it anymore, I'll call the question. All those in favor of recommending approval for item C, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item D, I think this is back to Ms. Copeland. Update on Crown Castle applications.
Actually, I'm going to punt this one to Ms. Herdina.
Oh, my
and,
goodness.
Mr.
Oh.
Brown. Now that we have Stephen Brown here as well.
Okay,
Our
well,
outside counsel.
we'll put him to work today.
All right.
Okay,
Well, first
you go tee us up, Ms. Herdina?
Well, I am, but first a shout out to the Lady Gamecock basketball team, correct? I have not heard anybody talk about that yet. And women power, let's go. Okay.
Amen.
That being said, we have an update on the Crown Castle litigation that has been going on in one form or another since 2017, dealing with Crown Castle's request to install their small cell 5G equipment on poles in the city and to replace or to install new poles in the city. And there's been a recent order out of the court that Steve Brown, who's our outside counsel with Clement Rivers, is going to talk to us about, but it relates directly to item B, which is our request that you authorize a template limited pole agreement today, which would allow us to basically give permission to Crown Castle to install equipment on our poles, which would alleviate the need for a separate pole, which is clearly what we want to achieve. So with that brief introduction, I'll just turn it over to Steve, who can tell you a little bit about the litigation and the need for your approval of the pole agreement. And also we've got Jordan on the line, who, if anybody has any questions about any particular permit applications or permit approvals, he could speak to that. Thank you.
All right, Peter. We got a lot of Peters on the phone today. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Councilman Shahid and Ms. Herdina. You may recall we had one round of litigation in front of Judge Norton where Crown Castle had attempted to argue that our ordinance as applied deprived it of the right to provide meaningful service in the city of Charleston. Judge Norton granted in part and denied in part that motion, finding that the city of Charleston had attempted to put in place what was necessary to deal with 5G, but that it being something new to us and Charleston being a unique city, whereas most cities just opened their arms to 5G at that point in time and want to collect money, the right of which has now been taken away from us by the FCC. So he issued a good order in that case that gave us 90 days to deal with any applications that had not been dealt with. We went through those applications and Mr. Lanier, the DRC, the mayor's office, Mr. Kronsberg, can't say enough about them negotiating to try and move these around to put them in the least objectionable locations that we could put them in based upon the limitations that we had placed upon us. And we worked all that out, and that worked out, except there were 4 that design review and ultimately the city decided that they were going to have to deny. Those were application 26, which is the across from Rainbow Row at the historic, the fencing that is sort of across from Rainbow Row. There's a nice hedge there. They were going to put one in the middle of that. 82 East Bay Street is the address for that one. There was Charleston 27, which is over on Rutledge Avenue and Gibbs Street. And the only way I can describe this one is there's a house that's undergoing extensive renovation there, especially on their outside porches. And this tower was going to be in the green right of way. And when they went out on any porch on that house, it was just going to be there. It was just very sides of that house, but large house, etc., beautiful porches, and then that large black tower. So that one we denied, or the city denied. Charleston 28 is at Trad and Limehouse Street, and that's a small brick house that is generally out of kilter with the homes around it in terms of its size. And by putting that black tower in front of that small brick house that the owner has put so much work in, you go see it, it's got beautiful window boxes. They've done everything they can to try to blend with the larger, grander houses next to it. And then there was just going to be a tower put in front of it. It was also a smaller sidewalk. So I think we had ADA compliance, but we had some concerns there. And then Charleston CHS 28 was that one. And then the last one was at the Four Corners of Law. And that's Charleston 32. And the only way I can describe that is as y'all leave second floor of City Hall, if you were able to go out on that beautiful staircase, you would look straight across the street at St. Michael's and you would see a big black tower.
Hey.
So we denied the design review committee denied those four. We went before Judge Norton on that. We were rather concerned because there's not a lot of support for denying these in the case law throughout the country. And he upheld all four of our denials. So we're very happy with that. So sometimes good things do happen to good people, even when the FCC continues to try to become involved.
He was just feeling bad about his ruling on the tour guide stuff, I think.
I've tried to guilt him as much as I could on that. What we do have now before you, though, with regard to this poll agreement, and I will tell you that there have been so many track change versions that I just noticed C was left blank, and we'll clean that up, but it was deleted, and I think it should have automatically renumbered or relettered, and it didn't. So if you see a blank C on yours, that's just an error, and that will be fixed. But they had 3 locations. One of them is on Broad, and I'm sorry, Jordan's got a chart. I don't have the exact address, but if you're going down Broad Street, heading towards the marina, on your right, there's a large white house that's got a big old palm tree that's right by the front door. Beautiful brick wall that's covered with flowers all year. And this was just going to stick out in the middle of the right of way there. The city has a pole a few feet away that is not being used, that could be utilized to do away with that black tower. And it is an area that if I recall correctly from walking it, is closer to a tree canopy. It's my experience from what I see here is when things go on what I call the good old fashioned telephone creosote poles, we have less issues, objections, problems than we do with the modern black towers, because the ones going on what I call an old fashioned telephone pole have gone around the city with from what I can tell, crossing my desk, much less opposition to the aesthetics of it as opposed to the black towers. So that would keep one off of Broad Street. The second one would be where Ashley Street and Cannon intersect. And if you know, on the left side there is the Low House. I know Councilman Waring, I've watched you on a meeting where the zoning of that house has been discussed and there's current litigation going. Big old beautiful white, I think federal style home there. And but it would be right at the corner there. And instead the city has a pole on one of the other corners, again, a wooden pole that would work and would do away with the need for a black tower. And then the third one is also on Ashley. And if you go down on Ashley, and I apologize for not having this address, there's an old gas station, a brick gas station that is for sale.
Ashley and Whitmore Street.
Okay. And where they had proposed, Councilmember Shaheed, to put the black tower was essentially right in the middle of that sidewalk. If you recall, that gas station has got sort of an open area, and then there's the sidewalk. And I think the owner of the property has put some bumpers or what have you to sort of separate the sidewalk from the open area to keep people from parking in there or what have you. But it would have been in front, just dead in front in the center of that sidewalk. Very, very unattractive. And instead, the city has a pole across the street that is adjacent to a already existing communication pole. And there are several palmetto trees. So it's a nice sort of area that's buffered and you don't see as much. And again, it would be on the wooden poles as opposed to these black towers. So for those three, they're city owned. At the city's suggestion, it was made to allow for utilization of those to avoid the 3 poles that came through design review committee. And so what we are asking now and what Judge Norton has told us we have to do is tell them yay or nay, will we allow them to go on those poles? As a practical matter, the way the FCC and the City of Portland case were decided, we have very little choice in the matter. But it does, again, keep us from having 3 more of the rather large towers. And instead, these are pre-existing poles in place that will just have slightly more equipment put on them and allow us to sort of keep those areas more attractive. And I understand that all of Charleston is unique and all of Charleston has its own attractions. This just happened to be 3 areas where we happen to have poles that weren't being used.
Okay. I think I followed all of that and got an idea of what we're dealing with. I guess we'll be getting a bunch of emails down from the group that's going to be wanting us to do nothing on these poles. But anyhow, all right, Councilmember Jackson, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm definitely have been following this, as Ms. Herdina knows, for quite some time now, as I'm being educated about the concerns of our citizens. And I do feel like, they have done their homework, but we're not here to debate the merits of their arguments against 5G as a worrisome concern into the future from a public health aspect. What I'm wondering, I thought when Ms. Herdina was introducing you that this was going to be some sort of sample or example of how we could do this existing poll ordinance and we wouldn't have to entertain any new polls. But now I'm confused because I thought you said they just happen to have, existing polls and we're the beneficiary of that. So are we going to make existing polls be the rule, or is it just when it's going to be, serendipity that it works out that way? Because that part worries me a lot. This was all sold to the industry or to the, when we first had our ordinance in effect, that these were unobtrusive. Yes, they were not, in line with our historic district and the look that we want to have for our lamp poles and all of that. But certainly the infrastructure itself wasn't supposed to be like something that would just be, that intrusive into someone's sidewalk area. So I'm really curious what your answer is about all that.
Well, I can try to explain some of that, and then we'll turn to Stephen and Jordan. What I meant by a template was that we have opportunities both with Crown going forward and looking at their permits, as well as all the other companies, Verizon and AT&T and others. And wherever it is possible to locate to a city existing pole, we clearly want to do that. And so when I said template, I apologize if I confuse things. I was hoping we could get your authority that this would be the form of a pole application that we could use going forward for not just these 3 sites, but for other permit applications that are going to come up in the future. Now, I guess I'll turn to Jordan specifically and Steve, but it's my understanding that they have looked at the option of co-locating or locating on a city pole in these other permit situations, permit applications, but there wasn't anything that was reasonable. There wasn't a pole that was reasonably available to move them to. But I guess I'll ask Steve or Jordan, who's been negotiating each and every one of these, just to confirm that. So these 3 that Steve talked about are ones where we have an opportunity now to do this. And I believe we've been looking at that opportunity as we've got along, but these are the only 3 that have presented themselves where legally we can, in effect, get them to move on the pole that already exists there. But Steve, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong.
I can jump in here, Susan. Thank you. Yes, that's essentially correct. We almost for every application for a new pole, we kind of scoured the area. In many cases, they scoured the area as well, knowing this request was coming, to see if there was any existing poles they could put it on. There were a handful of occasions where there just weren't poles nearby or appropriate poles. There may have been light poles that really wouldn't have worked or would have actually ended up being worse. And then in many cases, there were Dominion poles nearby that were not suitable by Dominion standards to attach their equipment on. So in a lot of cases, there weren't city poles, our poles, that would necessitate a pole attachment agreement between us and Crown Castle. There was some other utility pole and it was unsuitable, whether it held a high voltage power equipment or for some other reason Dominion would deny the pole attachment.
So it sounds like that this is a little bit of coincidence. We've got these poles that we own, they're available to us, and we're just trying to take advantage of using them and dictating where these cell lines or cell apparatus is going to be attached to them. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a pretty good idea that we go ahead and jump on this opportunity. All right, I don't think we have a motion on the floor yet as to this proposed agreement that Mr. Brown has brought to our attention. So I will entertain a motion to adopt recommendation adoption of item C on our agenda.
I'm gonna move for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. All right. So
Councilmember, it's item D, not C. Just wanted to clarify.
I'm sorry. Yes, I did say C, didn't I? It's item D. We've already taken care of C. Item D. My apologies. Thanks for bringing it to my attention.
You're welcome.
So are there any further discussion on item D? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I failed to ask if we would say no to this request, and then what happens?
If we were to say no, Judge Norton would issue, and I'm relatively sure, an injunction that would enjoin us from prohibiting them from putting actual towers at these 3 locations we've talked about, one on Broad Street, one over in the middle of the sidewalk next to the old gas station that's up for sale, and the other one next to the home at Ashley and Cannon. They would be able to put the black towers in its place.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but it just went out of my head.
We'll come back to you. Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, I do have one question. Did we try to offer this to the cell people before going to court? And they just kind of discounted now these alternative locations?
Councilman Waring, we had so many of them that they went to court over. We never went to court. They were the ones going, and we had a list very, very long.
Right.
Through negotiation and through the design review committee going back and through Mr. Lanier and having a moment, Mr. Kronsberg, and working with the design review, the mayor, Ms. Herdina, and also Ms. Copeland. I would just tell you, we took that long list and we got down to this relatively narrow list through negotiating and working and what have you. So my understanding is that the co-location for these 3, the use of city poles, came from the city itself in an effort to not put up more towers. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there were. Yeah,
it just seems, I mean, obviously it seems like such a wonderful alternative to what they initially wanted to do. You would think they wouldn't have to, if the city's working with them like that, why would they press the issue to get in front of a judge? Anyway.
I think Mr. Waring, the biggest, Councilman Waring, I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine.
The problem was they originally had a deal with SCANA, And SCANA was going to allow them to go on their, not their major electricity poles, but what I call sort of the non-major electricity poles. And those are the ones, much like a telephone pole, that don't light up everyone's inbox when they go in, like the black towers.
Yeah.
However, of course, Dominion purchased SCANA, put a set of guidelines, which forced Crown Castle to come back. And so the original plan that was put before the city and that everyone reviewed and that went on forever and ever and ever totally changed.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I just know that these towers are big money producing things when they can erect their own. I've been involved in collateral litigation with this stuff and know the value of these things. So it's if we got the towers, they can coexist. I mean, the structures, but they coexist. It just makes a whole lot of sense to be doing this and moving forward with it. Do we have an inventory of these other poles around the city, by the way? Is there an inventory of these things? I've just learned something new about what we own with poles. I just didn't know we had that many. So that's good. All right. Any further discussion?
I thought of my other question, Mr.
I knew
Chairman.
you were.
So I just want to, I think we all understand, but just for the record, so if we say yes to these 3 locations, then Crown Castle has already agreed to do the installation on those poles. Is that right?
We're not quite there because we have to get these terms and get the terms not just through this committee, but through city council. But I do not anticipate that there are issues. They have negotiated with us on the terms that are before you today. And they would rather be able to get their equipment up and moving than to have to go back to Judge Norton for a hearing. And then we get into the issue of what they can and can't do. Does he enjoin us from stopping them? What are our appeal rights, if any, what, et cetera? It becomes very messy. So it's my belief from numerous conversations with them that they would like to do this.
Okay, great.
Yes, we need to move on and improve this. So it sounds like to me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
All right, there's a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right, thank you all very much. And thank you, Mr. Brown. That was a somewhat complicated maze you had to carry us through, but I appreciate you breaking it down for us.
Thank you all very much. Y'all all have great afternoons.
All right, take care. We'll see you around the block.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'll simplify it for you. 1 pole is better than 2.
Even better than that, Mr. Mayor. 1 pole that we own is better than 2 that we. So, well done. All right, we're on item number E, which is a request to approve an MOU between Federal Health and the city of Charleston for a temporary COVID vaccination site. And who's from the legal department is going to walk us through this very quickly?
I get a motion on the floor. Move for approval.
Move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So can you all just give us a brief description of what this MOU is?
I can take the first stab. So MUSC did reach out to the city, I believe, about using the Arthur Christopher site? It's a recreation building. Since our last discussion with you, Mayor, we made some revisions to the MOU, which is essentially identical to the MOU we were working on with MUHA. I've just removed some of the provisions regarding the upfitting on the building. And we added a provision in there that they could use alternate sites if necessary or needed by FEDER. And they've agreed to these changes in theory. I just haven't gotten a hard copy back yet from FEDER with a signature. I've just sent another email asking for an update, and hopefully I'll have something to you guys today or tomorrow before the meeting.
That'd be helpful. All right.
It certainly would.
We have a motion that's been duly seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Councilmember Rappel, you still with us? Because we're talking about your district on these 2 annexations. I just want to make sure because
I'm back.
some of my golf balls from playing on Saturday may have ended up on Golfview Drive on the 10th hole. So I don't know if they still want to join the city after that destruction on that. All right, we have two annexations. One's on Golfview Drive and the other is in District 3, near my district, near Councilmember Waring's district, at 114 Magnolia Road. I'll entertain a motion to approve F.I. and F2.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion as to those two annexations? Anything from Mr. Morgan's office about this that we need to be wary of, Mr. Morgan?
Nothing to add, just two residential annexations.
I like it when you make it short and sweet for me, Mr. Morgan. Appreciate that. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I know we're over time. I'm just curious to ask Mr. Morgan or whoever, is there a process once we have given a property second reading for annexation? Should they be notified somehow officially or informally?
They get a welcome letter and info about, when they're going to get their garbage can and issues like that.
That's great. Do you know how long approximately that takes to arrive? Because I have friends who I was at a vaccination-free dinner with on Saturday night, and we voted them in at our last meeting, second reading in February, and they hadn't heard one word from us, which was a little disjointing.
I will find out, and maybe that letter went out a little bit later than it should have, but I will find out what's going on that one.
I'm just glad to know there's a process because I couldn't imagine there isn't. So thanks.
Understood.
Yes, sir, Mr. Pell. Councilmember Pell.
Thank you, Chairman. And I know we're over time, and just real briefly, Christopher, if you know, what is the story behind 2138 Golfview? I'm just curious to see how this came about. This is in Riverland Terrace, and there's more holes than donut over there in that neighborhood when it comes to the city of Charleston. And I just kind of wanted to see if there was a bit of a story behind how this came about so we could sort of help better understand the processes out there and the incentive structure.
They're so enamored with your leadership, Councilmember Appel, they just want to be part of the team.
And I teed up that alley-oop pretty good.
Well, I'm giving you Mr. Morgan, anything you can add to that compliment to Councilmember Appel?
That came in, we've had several over the last 6 months in Riverland Terrace, and this one came into us very often. There are folks that contact us via our web links and ask about a tax and fee comparison. That's a very, very important thing to folks. And of course, our water rates are slightly lower on James Island. The taxes end up being about the same as the PSD, but with the water and sewer savings, sometimes that makes the difference. So that's my understanding of that one on Golfview.
Good to know. Thank you.
Which is part of the reason why we need to be pushing these annexations, because the benefits that these folks get, they just don't understand. And Mr. Morgan, you hit the nail on the head for me. It's a huge benefit for them financially.
Correct. James, West Ashley especially has some savings because of the St. Andrews PSD's tax rates. On James Island, there isn't as much savings, but West Ashley, there definitely is.
Councilwoman Jackson, you had your hand back up.
I was just going to say, I think one of the secret treasures for Riverland is Troy Miller. He's an ambassador for joining the city. So you owe him a little thank you, Councilmember Appel.
He's got me on speed dial. We talk all the time. And you get a benefit at the Muni, right? If you're a city resident.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what got my friends.
Things are cheaper.
They are slightly better.
Interesting. Well, thank y'all. Let's go talk about stormwater.
Yeah, and by the way, in the improvements we made to the Muni and people who own houses that border around there have enjoyed and will enjoy a magnificent vista from their back porches or their front yards as to what we have done over there. So all kidding aside about what we're doing with these annexations, those folks have got a little bit of a gym over there on some of these holes. It's a magnificent course, and even hackers like myself really enjoy being out there. Hats off to our staff and the Friends of the Muni who did a wonderful job with that amenity. All right, are there any other business that we need to take up? And Councilmember Waring, you will please note that we started late because of traffic and transportation. So I'm cutting into your committee time. Not my fault on this one, okay?
I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed. I just want you to know.
All right. There being no further business, the real estate committee is hereby adjourned, and we'll transition into public works. Thank you all so much for everybody's work and contribution.
Great. Thank you all.